You do not become easy to control because you are weak. You become easy to control when your reactions become familiar. When people know one cold reply will make you overthink. One delay will make you check your phone again. One accusation will make you explain your entire heart like you were standing in court. And slowly, without noticing, you teach people where your buttons are. They learn what makes you defend yourself, what makes you soften, what makes you come back, what makes you break your own boundaries just to feel understood. But the moment you stop being so easy to read, something changes. Your silence starts feeling different. Your presence stops begging to be interpreted correctly. And people begin to think twice, because the version of you they used to predict is no longer the one standing in front of them. You become easy to handle the moment people know exactly which button to press. They know which sentence will make you explain yourself. They know which delay will make you check your phone again. They know which cold reply will make you send one more paragraph, even when a simple silence would have protected your dignity. And the painful part is not that they studied you deeply. The painful part is that you kept handing them the pages. Because you wanted peace. Because you thought if you explained your heart clearly enough, they would stop misunderstanding you. So you answered fast. You apologized when you were not wrong. You defended your intentions to people who were not asking for truth, only access. You let your face change when their mood changed. You let your whole day bend around one message, one look, one shift in tone. And slowly, without noticing, you became predictable. People learned that you would always respond, always clarify, always soften, always come back after being disrespected, as long as they gave you a small sign that maybe they still cared. They learned that your silence did not last. They learned that your boundaries were emotional announcements, not actual walls. They learned that if they waited long enough, you would break first. That is where the uncomfortable truth begins. People do not only respond to who you are, they respond to what they believe they can get away with around you. If they believe you are afraid of distance, they will use distance. If they believe you need approval, they will ration it. If they believe your emotions spill out the moment pressure touches you, they will stop taking your calm seriously, because they've already seen where it ends. This does not mean you become cold. It does not mean you perform mystery like a mask. That kind of behavior is still weakness, just dressed in control. Real privacy is quieter than that. It is not pretending you do not feel. It is deciding that not everyone deserves the full evidence of what you feel. There is a difference between being honest and being open to the wrong people. There is a difference between being kind and being available for every emotional pull. You can have a good heart and still stop giving people a live reaction to every wound they create. You can care deeply and still choose not to prove it every time someone doubts you. The shift begins when you stop making your inner world a public room. You do not have to tell everyone what hurt you. You do not have to explain why your energy changed. You do not have to correct every assumption, chase every misunderstanding, or make your pain understanding to people who benefit from acting confused. Sometimes the most disciplined thing you can do is let your face stay calm while your mind quietly records what was revealed. That is when people start feeling the difference. Not because you become dramatic, not because you punish them, but because something in you no longer moves on command. You stop giving instant access to your fear. You stop showing every crack the moment pressure arrives. You stop allowing people to predict your next emotional move before you have even made it. And at first it feels strange. You may feel guilty for not replying the way you usually do. You may feel cruel for holding back an explanation. You may feel lonely when you stop performing warmth for people who only respected you when you were easy. But that discomfort is not a sign that you are becoming heartless. It is the sound of an old pattern losing its place inside you. You are not hiding yourself. You are finally choosing where your truth is safe. The moment you stop being easy to read is the moment you stop living as an open wound in front of people who never learned how to be gentle with it. You lose more of yourself in the sentences you never needed to say. Not because your feelings were wrong. Not because your truth had no value. But because somewhere along the way, you started using words as a shield against rejection. You spoke quickly so silence would not make you anxious. You explained every small change in your mood so nobody would accuse you of being difficult. You defended your intentions before anyone even asked, because you were already tired of being misunderstood. And people noticed. They noticed that if they questioned you long enough, you would give them more access than they deserved. They noticed that if they stayed cold, you would start filling the space with paragraphs. They noticed that if they acted confused about your boundaries, you would begin softening them with explanations until the boundary no longer sounded like a boundary at all. That is a painful thing to see in yourself, because you were not trying to look weak. You were trying to keep peace. You were trying to be fair, mature, kind, clear. You thought that if you explained calmly enough, people would finally treat your heart with care. But some people do not hear your explanation as honesty. They hear it as proof that you can be pulled back into the same conversation again, and that is where you have to stop. Not with anger. Not with a performance, not with some dramatic version of silence designed to make them chase you. You stop because you realize that every unnecessary word is a small withdrawal from your own authority. Every time you over-explain to someone committed to misunderstanding you, you teach them that your peace is negotiable. Every time you defend your worth to someone who already benefited from doubting it, you make their opinion feel larger than your own center. There is a kind of strength that does not announce itself. It sits inside the pause before you reply. It lives in the message you decide not to send. It shows up when you read something that would have once made your hand shake. And instead of reacting, you breathe, look away, and let the moment pass through you, without handing it your dignity. That silence will feel uncomfortable at first. You may sit with your phone in your hand, typing, deleting, typing again. Your mind will tell you that you need to explain, that they will think you are rude, that they will get the wrong idea, that if you do not speak now, you will lose your chance to be understood. But deep down, you already know something you have been avoiding. The people who respect you do not need endless proof, and the people who enjoy your emotional labor will never be satisfied by one more explanation. So you begin choosing your words differently. You stop speaking from panic. You stop replying just because your nervous system wants relief. You stop giving long emotional reports to people who only read them for leverage. Your answers become cleaner. Your tone becomes steadier. You do not need to sound harsh. You do not need to sound mysterious. You simply stop treating every person as if they have earned full access to your inner world. And slowly something changes. People begin to feel the weight of what you do say because they can no longer count on you filling every silence. They cannot easily pull you into defense. They cannot keep you spinning inside explanations. They notice that your words have become fewer, but more deliberate. They notice that you are no longer speaking just to be liked. That is the moment your presence begins to change. Because when you speak less from fear, your voice no longer sounds like a request to be accepted. It sounds like a person who has returned to themselves. A person who has returned to themselves. A person who no longer leaks their pain into every room. A person who understands that words are not valuable because they are many. They are valuable because they are many. They are valuable because you finally stopped giving them away to people who only wanted to measure how much control they still had over you. They expected you to break in the exact place you always broke before. That is the quiet humiliation nobody talks about. Not the argument itself. Not the cold message. Not the disrespect disguised as a joke. The real pain is realizing that some people already know the route to your reaction. They know what will make your voice shake. They know what will make your voice shake. They know what will make you send the long reply. They know what kind of silence will make you question your worth before the night is over. And for a long time, it worked. You felt the shift in someone's tone, and your whole body changed. You checked your phone, even when you promised yourself you would not. You replayed conversations while trying to sleep, searching for the exact moment you became too much, too honest, too available, too easy to hurt. You told yourself you were just trying to understand, but deep down you were trying to regain control of a feeling someone else had taken from you. That is how people learn your emotional access points. They do not always need to shout. Sometimes they only need to withdraw. Sometimes they only need to withdraw. Sometimes they only need to act slightly colder than yesterday. Sometimes they only need to ignore what matters to you, and watch how quickly you start proving that it matters. And if every small wound makes you lose your center, people begin to believe your calm is temporary. They wait for it to crack. This is the uncomfortable truth. Some people do not respect your pain more because they see it clearly. They study it. They study it. They measure how far they can go before you react. And when you react the same way every time, they stop seeing your reaction as a boundary. They start seeing it as a pattern, so the change begins in a place nobody applauds. It begins in the pause, the moment you read something that would normally pull you apart, and you do not rush to answer. The moment someone tries to make you feel small, and instead of defending your entire character, you let their behavior stand in the room by itself. The moment you feel anger rising in your chest, but you do not hand it your mouth. You breathe. You notice. You stay with yourself. Not because it does not hurt. It hurts more than they know. But for the first time, your pain does not get to drive. Your fear does not get to write the message. Your wounded pride does not get to write the message. Your wounded pride does not get to drag you into a performance you will regret later. You let the first wave pass. You let your body settle. You let your silence become a locked door instead of an open wound. And that changes the atmosphere around you. People can feel when you no longer move on command. They can feel when the old tricks do not pull the old reaction. They may not say it directly, but something in them notices. The insult does not land the same. The delay does not control you the same. The distance does not make you chase the same. You are still human. You still feel. But now there is a space between what happens to you and what leaves you. That space is where your self-respect returns. You begin to understand that calmness is not pretending to be above pain. It is refusing to let pain make you careless with yourself. It is coming home tired, seeing the message, feeling the old urge to explain everything, and choosing not to abandon your dignity for a few minutes of relief. It is knowing that not every accusation deserves your defense. Not every silence deserves your panic. Not every person deserves to witness your collapse. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming less available to emotional control. And the first time you remain calm where they expected you to fall apart, something inside you will feel unfamiliar, almost lonely, almost wrong. Because your nervous system is used to chasing repair, chasing answers, chasing reassurance. But stay there. Stay inside that quiet discomfort. That is not emptiness. That is discipline being born in a place where panic used to live. They may still try to press the same buttons, but you are no longer standing in the same place. And when people realize they can still hurt you, but they can no longer easily direct you, they are forced to see a version of you they did not prepare for. It is exhausting trying to prove your heart to people who have already decided how they want to see you. You can sit there with a tired face, choosing your words carefully, explaining what you meant, explaining what you did not mean, explaining what you did not mean, explaining why you reacted, why you went quiet, why you finally stopped giving the same energy. And still, after all that, they look at you like the truth is too inconvenient for them to hold. That kind of misunderstanding does something to you. It makes you feel trapped inside a version of yourself that someone else created. You start defending things you never did. You start apologizing for tones you never meant. You start reading messages 3 times before sending them. Not because you were unclear, but because you are afraid of giving people one more reason to twist you. You become careful in a way that does not feel peaceful. It feels like walking through your own life trying not to be misread. And maybe you learned this early. Maybe in your family you had to explain your feelings before anyone respected them. Maybe in relationships, silence was used against you until you felt forced to speak. Maybe with friends you became the one who always clarified, always softened, always made sure nobody left the conversation uncomfortable, even if you were the one bleeding inside it. So now when someone misunderstands you, something in you panics. You want to fix it immediately. You want to send the message. You want to make them see the full picture. You want to say, no, that is not who I am. No, that is not what I meant. No, you are missing the part where I tried, where I cared, where I stayed longer than I should have. But here is the truth that hurts before it frees you. Some people are not confused. They are comfortable with the version of you that benefits them. If they see you as too sensitive, they do not have to face how careless they were. If they see you as difficult, they do not have to admit they ignored your limits. If they see your distance as cruelty, they do not have to ask what they did to make closeness feel unsafe. And when you keep fighting to be understood by people like that, you are not protecting your name anymore. You are handing them control over your nervous system. You check their tone to know if you are allowed to feel calm. You wait for their approval before you trust your own memory. You begin measuring your goodness by whether people choose to interpret you fairly. That is a dangerous place to live, because anyone with enough confidence can make you doubt what you know happened. The shift begins when you stop chasing every false version of yourself. You let some people misunderstand you without rushing after them. Not because it does not hurt, it will hurt. Your chest may feel heavy, your hands may want to type. Your mind may prepare a perfect explanation while you are trying to sleep. But somewhere in that discomfort, you realize that your peace cannot depend on winning a trial you never agreed to enter. You do not need to correct every story. You do not need to stand at the door of someone's opinion, begging to be let in as your real self. The people who want to know the truth will come closer with care. The people who want to know the truth will come closer with care. The people who want control will keep moving the target, no matter how clearly you speak. So you begin to move differently. You become quieter when you are misread, more grounded when your intentions are questioned, less desperate to prove that you are good. You still speak when it matters. You still take responsibility when you are wrong. But you stop dragging your dignity into conversations where honesty has no safe place to land. And that is when people feel the change. They expect you to defend, explain, plead, return, soften, and open the emotional file again. But instead, you let their misunderstanding stand without feeding it your whole soul. You let them keep the story if they need it that badly. You walk back into your own life with a calm they cannot easily disturb. The day you stop needing everyone to understand you is the day you stop living as a prisoner inside other people's interpretations. You gave people the most private parts of you before they had proven they could handle the ordinary parts with care. That is how it usually begins. Not with a betrayal you can see clearly, not with one dramatic moment that tells you to walk away. It begins with you opening too fast because the connection feels warm for a moment. Someone listens to you for one night, and suddenly they know stories you have not even fully healed from. Someone gives you attention and you start making room for them in places they have not earned. Someone shows interest and you begin treating potential like proof. You tell yourself you are just being real. You tell yourself you do not want to play games. You want to be honest, open, loyal, available. You do not want to become guarded or suspicious. And that sounds noble, until you realize how many times your openness became an entrance for people who only wanted the comfort of your depth without the responsibility of respecting it. That is the part that hurts. You were not wrong for having a soft place inside you. You were wrong for giving strangers, temporary people, half-present people, and emotionally careless people the same access you should have reserved for trust. You let them see your wounds before they showed consistency. You gave them your time before they respected your boundaries. You made yourself reachable before you knew whether they valued your presence or simply enjoyed your availability. And slowly, they learned the wrong thing about you. They learned that you could be interrupted, that you could be reached anytime, that your forgiveness came quickly, that your loneliness made you generous, that if they disappeared in return with the right tone, you would probably open the door again. Not because you were weak, but because you kept confusing emotional intensity with emotional safety. There is a difference. Intensity rushes in. Safety stays long enough to be measured. Intensity says the right things when the moment is warm. Safety behaves with care when there is nothing to gain. Intensity makes you want to reveal everything. Safety gives you time to reveal slowly without feeling afraid. When you understand this, something in you begins to slow down. You stop handing out full access because someone made you feel seen for one evening. You stop replying instantly just because you are afraid silence will make them lose interest. You stop rearranging your piece for people who have not shown that they can be steady. You stop treating every new connection like it deserves a front row seat in your life. At first, this will feel unfamiliar. You may feel selfish for taking longer to respond. You may feel distant for not explaining every detail of your day. You may feel cold for not giving someone the emotional version of you they are used to receiving. But that guilt is not always a signal that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is just the old habit of overgiving, trying to pull you back into a role where everyone else feels comfortable and you feel drained. You are allowed to have layers. You are allowed to be kind without being fully available. You are allowed to care without rushing closeness. You are allowed to let time reveal whether someone deserves more of you. That is not cruelty. That is not cruelty. That is wisdom returning to the part of you that used to confuse access with love. People think twice when they realize your presence has a gate, not a wall built from bitterness, not a mask designed to make you seem untouchable. A gate. Something that opens with trust, patience, behavior, and consistency. Something that does not swing wide for charm alone. Something that protects the rooms inside you, where your peace, your focus, your tenderness, and your future are still being built. And when you begin giving access slowly, you stop living like your heart is public property. You start watching how people handle small boundaries before you give them bigger truths. You notice who respects your pace and who becomes irritated when they can no longer reach you whenever they want. You see who values you, and who only valued the ease of entering your life without effort. That is where your dignity changes, because the version of you that gives less too soon is not colder, it is clearer. It finally understands that the right people will not need you to abandon your own protection just to prove you care. And the wrong people will expose themselves the moment they realize your access is no longer automatic. The most dangerous mistakes you made did not happen because you saw nothing. They happened because you saw something, felt it in your body, and talked yourself out of believing it. You noticed the way their energy changed when they no longer needed to impress you. You noticed how their apologies sounded clean, but their behavior stayed dirty. You noticed how they could be warm when they wanted access, then distant when you needed care. You noticed the small contradiction, the repeated excuse, the sudden kindness after a long stretch of carelessness, but instead of trusting the pattern, you trusted the performance, because the performance felt better. It gave you relief for a moment. It gave your tired heart something to hold. One sweet message, one late apology, one intense conversation, one promise spoken with the right tone. And suddenly you started rewriting the evidence. You told yourself maybe you were too guarded. Maybe you were overthinking. Maybe this time they understood. Maybe this version of them was the real one. And the repeated version was just stress, fear, bad timing, or pain they did not know how to handle. That is how you stayed longer than your peace could afford. You did not stay because you were blind. You stayed because you were blind. You stayed because you wanted the beautiful moments to mean more than the repeated ones. You wanted potential to become proof. You wanted words to repair what behavior kept damaging. And when someone gave you just enough warmth to confuse your instincts, you kept lowering the standard until inconsistency started looking normal. That is the uncomfortable truth. A person does not reveal themselves only in what they say when they are afraid to lose you. They reveal themselves in what they repeat when they think you will stay anyway. They reveal themselves in the days after the apology, in the quiet choices, in how they handle your boundaries, when your voice is calm, and whether they become careful with your trust or simply more skilled at getting it back. You have to stop being seduced by temporary effort, not because you should become suspicious of everyone, not because every mistake means someone is false, but because your life becomes painful when you keep treating performances like character. Anyone can speak beautifully in a moment of pressure. Anyone can become gentle when they feel you slipping away. Anyone can say the thing your heart has been waiting to hear when they realize silence is finally growing inside you. But patterns do not beg for attention. They sit there quietly, repeating themselves, waiting for you to stop negotiating with what you already know. This is where your self-respect becomes sharper. You begin watching without rushing to react. You listen, but you also measure. You hear the apology, but you look for the change. You notice the promise, but you wait for the pattern. You stop letting one emotional night erase 3 months of emotional absence. You stop handing your trust back to someone just because they sounded sincere while losing access to you. And slowly, your nervous system begins to trust you again. Because every time you choose the pattern over the performance, you prove to yourself that you are no longer easy to distract from reality. You no longer need the fantasy to survive the truth. You can sit with what is uncomfortable. You can admit that someone's words were beautiful, but their consistency was missing. You can care about a person and still refuse to be guided by the version of them that only appears when consequences arrive. That kind of awareness changes your presence. People feel it when charm no longer makes you forget. They feel it when intensity no longer rushes you into trust. They feel it when you are polite, calm, even kind, but no longer easily convinced. You do not accuse. You do not chase proof. You do not interrogate every detail. You simply observe long enough for the truth to become visible. And once you learn to watch patterns, you stop being impressed by the mask people wear. When they want something from you, you begin to respect the quiet evidence more than the loud performance. You begin to understand that consistency is not boring. It is the only place where safety can actually live. And the moment you stop ignoring what keeps repeating, you stop abandoning yourself for what only appears once in a while. The hardest exit is the one nobody claps for. No final speech, no long message that explains every wound, no dramatic scene where they finally understand what they did. Just you, sitting with the heaviness in your chest, realizing that staying one more time would not be love anymore. It would be self-abandonment with a familiar face. And that realization does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives when you come home tired, and notice you are more peaceful alone than you are with the person you kept trying to reach. Sometimes it arrives after you reread the same conversation, and feel embarrassed by how much of yourself you had to explain just to receive basic respect. Sometimes it arrives late at night, when your phone is quiet, and you finally admit that you were not waiting for a message. You were waiting for proof that the pain meant something to them. That is why leaving feels so difficult. You are not only walking away from a person, a place, a friendship, a pattern, or a version of your life. You are walking away from the hope that they would finally see it your way. You are walking away from the hope that they would finally see it your way. The changed behavior you kept making space for. The conversation where everything becomes clear and your heart no longer feels foolish for caring. But there is an uncomfortable truth hidden inside that hope. Sometimes your need for closure is just the last door your attachment uses to keep you inside a room that already drained you. You say you want one final conversation, but part of you wants one final chance for them to become who you needed them to be. You say you want to explain, but part of you wants your explanation to make them softer. You say you want peace, but part of you still wants them to feel the size of what they lost. That is human. But it is also where you must be careful, because if your exit becomes a performance, you are still asking the same person to witness your worth. You are still handing them the power to decide whether your pain was valid. You are still turning your dignity into a scene, and hoping they respond correctly this time. Real self-respect leaves differently. It does not slam every door just to prove there was a door. It does not announce its absence like a threat. It does not announce its absence like a threat. It does not beg to be missed. It does not destroy what remains just to make the silence louder. It simply reaches a point where your peace becomes more important than being understood by someone who only understood you when it benefited them. And that kind of leaving will feel strange. Your hands may want to type the final paragraph. Your mind may prepare the perfect sentence, the one that explains the whole history, the nights you stayed awake, the chances you stayed awake, the chances you stayed, the quiet disappointment you carried. You may imagine them reading it and finally pausing, finally regretting, finally realizing. But then you stop. Not because your feelings are small, because your dignity is no longer available for negotiation. You breathe. You put the phone down. You let the silence remain clean. You do not turn your pain into evidence. You do not collect every injury and present it like a case. You do not keep standing in front of someone who already showed you how little they could hold. You walk away without making your exit another way to chase them. That is when something inside you begins to return. At first, it may not feel like peace. It may feel like emptiness. Your routine may feel broken. Your evenings may feel too quiet. You may reach for the old chaos because at least chaos felt connected. But slowly, the silence stops feeling like punishment. It starts becoming space. Space to sleep without rehearsing arguments. Space to rebuild habits you abandoned. Space to hear your own thoughts without someone else's confusion sitting on top of them. And people feel that kind of exit. They may not admit it. They may pretend it does not matter. They may wait for the old version of you to come back, the one who explained, returned, softened, and reopened the door. But when you do not, when your absence stays calm, when your life keeps moving without a performance, something changes. They realize you are not trying to hurt them. You were finally done hurting yourself to keep access to them. And that is the kind of departure people remember, not because it was loud, not because it begged for attention, but because it carried the one thing they never expected from you. Quiet finally. The version of you that returns quietly will confuse people more than the version that left loudly ever could, because they expected a reaction. They expected you to come back with anger, with explanations, with proof that the silence was only temporary. They expected the old pattern to repeat itself. The one where you disappear for a while, feel the weight of loneliness, then return with your heart open again, hoping this time they would treat you differently. But something changed in the silence. Not all at once, not in some dramatic moment where you suddenly felt healed. It happened in small private ways nobody saw. It happened when you woke up and did not check for their message first. It happened when you forced yourself through a normal day, while your mind kept trying to drag you backward. It happened when you came home tired and chose rest instead of reopening an old wound. It happened when you wanted to explain, but stayed quiet long enough to realize that your peace was not waiting inside their response. That is the part people do not understand. They think silence means nothing is happening. They think because you are not posting your pain, not announcing your growth, not showing your struggle, that you are still the same person they knew. They do not see the discipline it takes to stop chasing. They do not see the nights you almost broke your own boundary. They do not see you rebuilding your routine one small choice at a time, eating better, sleeping earlier, saving money, training your body, cleaning your space, working in private, learning how to live without needing emotional permission from anyone. And maybe you did not see it at first either. Maybe you thought healing would feel cleaner. Maybe you expected strength to feel calm from the beginning. But at first it felt like emptiness. It felt like standing in a room after everyone left and not knowing what to do with the quiet. It felt like your identity had been built around reacting, explaining, proving, and waiting. And now that you were no longer doing those things, you had to meet yourself without all the noise. That is where the real transformation begins. Not when people notice you. Not when they regret losing access. Not when someone comes back and realizes you were different. It begins when you stop needing their recognition to make your change real. You no longer rebuild so they can see what they lost. You rebuild because you are tired of living in a way that keeps making you available to disrespect. You rebuild because your life cannot remain organized around people who only valued you when you were easy to reach. And this new version of you does not need to be loud. You do not need to walk into rooms with a hard face. You do not need to walk into rooms with a hard face. You do not need to punish people with distance. You simply become more difficult to pull out of yourself. You listen without rushing to reveal. You care without handing over control. You forgive without reopening every door. You move with a quiet awareness that not everyone deserves the same version of you. People will feel that difference before they understand it. They will notice that you do not explain as much. You do not react as quickly. You do not volunteer your pain just to make others comfortable. You can smile and still keep your boundaries. You can smile and still keep your boundaries. You can be kind and still be unavailable for chaos. You can stand in the same room with someone who once had too much power over your emotions and not feel the old need to prove that you are okay. That is when they think twice. Because the person they knew could be predicted. The person they knew could be softened with a little attention, pulled back with a little guilt, disturbed with a little guilt, disturbed with a little silence. But the person standing there now has become harder to move, not because the heart is gone, but because the heart is finally protected by discipline. You did not become someone else. You became less accessible to what used to control you. And that is the quietest form of change. When your presence no longer asks to be understood, your silence no longer begs to be noticed, and your peace no longer depends on anyone being careful with what you have finally learned to protect. If this video reached a part of you that has been tired of explaining, tired of reacting, and tired of being too available to people who never handled your presence with care, then do not ignore that feeling. Let it become the beginning of a quieter standard. Like this video, if it helped you see yourself more clearly. Subscribe if you are rebuilding in silence and want more conversations like this. Not loud motivation, not fake confidence, but calm self-respect, emotional discipline, and the kind of inner control that changes how you move through the world. And before you leave, write one word in the comments: control. Not because you want to control others, but because you are finally learning how to stop being controlled by every mood, message, silence, and misunderstanding around you. Keep watching, because your next shift may begin in the next video.